This is Dick Mullally on August 26, 1977. I'm visiting my folks and talking to my mother now. Mom, do you think you can answer some questions for me?
Well, I'll sure try.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in Muskegon. I don't know what street it was, but it was on Christmas morning, 1908. Being born, in those days, babies were born at home, so I was born in the wee hours of the morning, and my dad put me in a basket under the Christmas tree for my 2-year-old sister and my 6-year-old brothers to find me, that Santa Claus had brought me. And this stayed leave for a long, long time.
I suppose you had other presents, too. You weren't the only present, were you?
I don't suppose so. I don't feel sorry for the poor kids. That's all they got.
Can you tell us about the families that your parents came from? One was German and one was Dutch.
Yes, my dad's people came from Amsterdam, Holland. But I don't know where and when they met, but they were married in this country. And my grandpa died. He was a cuddled vegetable. He was, somehow or another, she had a lame leg. I don't know just how it happened. His name was Johannes Neal, and he died of cancer in 1901, the rather young age. He was born in 1843. I can't subtract so quick to tell you how old he was. My grandma's name was Janka, but in English, American, we called her Jenny. Sipama was her maiden name. And she, after a certain number of years, she remarried, and then her name was Dijksterhout. But I don't know what her second husband's first name was, but he was a spry old man. At the age of 85, he could run and jump over a fence. But he died of, and then they lived in Grand Rapids. He died of pneumonia. So then she was a widow for quite a few years, and she lived with my aunt, her daughter, up in New Era, Mrs. Grace Kimmer. And she died of old age. I don't know what it was. And there were a brother. My dad had 3 brothers. An older brother, Peter, and he lived in Deer River, Minnesota. He was quite a bit older. Another brother, Henry, he was a meat cutter. He a lot of times run a meat market. And a younger brother, Jacob, he was killed on a box, hit by a train. He was riding on a box, Hancock, in Michigan City, Indiana, at the age of 25 in 1913. And I believe that's all I can think of in a hurry about my dad's side of the family. My mother's people came from Germany, Melrose, Germany. I believe it's supposed to be not too far from Berlin. And they were married over there. And after having 3 children, my grandpa's name was Charles. My grandma always called him Carl. And her name was Caroline Albrecht. They were married and they had 3 children. Wilhelm, Marie, and Wilhelmina. And in 1880, they decided to come to this country to seek a better time, better life. My grandpa came over first and he settled, and he found a place and a job of some sort in Pennsylvania, and he saved up money and sent for his family to come, including Grandma's mother, Mrs. Henry Wilhelmina Albrecht. But he arranged with some people, some cousins of Caroline's in Montague, for them to arrange the passage. And they, thinking that it would be nice for the family to come here and visit them first, they made arrangements for them to come to Montague. So Grandma and her mother and the 3 children came into Montague, and Grandpa, when they notified him, of course, he decided there was nothing to stay in Pennsylvania for. He might as well come over here. So he was here, and he was looking for them every morning in the station. Grandma came here, and she realized she wasn't in the place that she expected. But the station manager, Master, reassured her that her husband was there. And so they settled in White River Township at the mouth of White Lake and Lake Michigan. And the next summer, their 9-year-old boy, nearly 10, drowned in the channel. And he was buried in the Mount Cemetery. And my mother was born 2 months later. So in either that year yet, in 1881, or the following year, they moved to Laketon Township. There they farmed, cut wood, picked berries, or did anything there could be to make a living. And they had 3 more children, Lillian, Paul, and Sophia. That's all I can think of.
What do you remember of them in their old age?
Oh.
They had tragedy in their life, didn't they?
Yes, sure. I know Grandpa and Grandma. We grew up close to Grandpa and Grandma. They lived about a mile from our place. We cut right through the woods. We'd go through their yard every morning going to school. And we would stop in if we had time, going or coming, or see them out in the yard. Watch Grandma when she milked the cow. Grandpa might be going our way with the horse and wagon or the horse and sleighs and give us a ride. Partway to school, we had a long way to walk. And then he worked in shingle mills, and he built a house in the early days, and he sided it with shingles. It was weathered, the shingles were, and they were, after the family was all grown up and gone, they were out cutting wood, and Grandma always went out with him. She had to. Her mother took care of the children until she died in 1901. So that Grandma always worked outside a lot. They were out cutting wood, and it was late in the afternoon. They came home, and their house was burned down. The sparks from the chimney had set the roof shingles or the siding shingles on fire. They went to come over to our place through the woods, but it was quite a stormy, and they got lost. And I went outside and I heard somebody calling. And I went in and I said, somebody's calling. So my mother stepped out and she said, well, that's Tom Mom. So my dad and my brother went out and found them heartbroken, crying that their house and everything was gone. They stayed at our place that night. And then there was a little cottage on the place that they started new in. And at that time, Grandma was 73 years old and Grandpa was 68. Quite late in age to start over again. That was in 1919. It was a hard winter.
They both lived to be quite elderly, didn't they?
Grandma and Grandpa lived. Grandma was 86, but shortly before she passed away, my Aunt Wilhelmina, Minnie we called her, was a widow with some children at home yet, and she moved in with Grandpa and Grandma, and they combined to help each other out. So she was there, and my grandma, she died of flu in 1932 at the age of 86. So then Aunt Minnie took care of Grandpa for 9 years. He died at the age of 90 in 1941. It was quite a burden for her in the last few years. And it wasn't long after he died that she had a stroke herself and had very hard time. She died in 1953, so she had quite a few years that she was in and out of the nursing homes. She recovered from her first stroke, but when she had her second stroke, she learned to use her left hand to do a lot of things. But then when she had a stroke and her left side was affected also, that's when she had to resort to a nursing home.
Can you tell us about your parents as they were young and met and married and started to raise their family?
Well, I assume that, I never did know for sure, but I assume my mother and dad met at my Aunt Minnie's and Uncle Henry's place, because my Uncle Henry and my dad's name was Johannes also, but he always went for the name of John. My mother's name was Helena, and her sister Wilhelmina, and called Minnie. Two sisters were married to two brothers, and I assume that that's where they met. And they married in 1902 and lived in Sweden for about 12, 13 or so years, and had, I think, six children, losing the third one. The third one they lost at the age of 1 year. 1.5 years he was, Carl. Johnny was the oldest, and it wasn't the third child, it was the second. Grace was the third child. I was the fourth. I am Carol. And Florence and Leona were born in Muskegon. And they figured they could have a better life, a better place to raise the family out in the country, so they homesteaded. They got when the time was up, they got their deed right from President Woodrow Wilson. They moved out in the country, and the furniture was set right in the bushes. They pitched a tent, and they lived in the tent the first summer. Wind, storm, or whatnot. Built a little house covered with tar paper for the first winter, and added the lean-to on the next year. The next children born out in the country was Jeanette, Doris, and Mary was born, but she died at the age of 5 from whooping cough and pneumonia. And then was Peter, and Helen, and Lawrence. I was the built-in babysitter. My mother always trusted me to take care of the children as she went out and picked berries, worked in the garden, or we used to pick arbutus in the spring and sell them to buy shoes and clothing. I took care of and diapered Jeanette, and I'm only 5.5 years older than her. I took care of Doris and Peter and Mary, her son, but she died so young, and Helen. I never took care of Lawrence to amount to anything because by that time I was grown up and had went to live with Grace, and my sister Grace in Muskegon, and worked in the Amazon. My mother, Lawrence was only 3 years old when my mother passed away, but she was sick nearly that whole 3 years. In those days, back in 1929 and a couple of years before that, the doctors didn't seem to know what was the matter with it, but their death certificate says myxedema, which is an inactive thyroid. But we assume that she must have had sugar diabetes because it has turned up in the family, and some of, as we remember her, some of her symptoms and so on point to that. But she died so young at the age of 47, leaving 7 children at home. My dad, he stayed single. The older children, because there were so many girls in the family, the older girls took care of the younger ones as they grew up. My dad stayed single for 17 years. The children all grew up, never got into any trouble, and we have a close family relationship. We all just love to get together, and if something's the matter with one, the rest of them all know it and all do what they can to help out. We keep in close contact. My dad married Jeanette's mother-in-law, which he knew from the time Jeanette and Clarence got married in 1932. And so Dad and Myrtle Baker got married in 1945. So you see, they knew each other for 13 years before they got married, and then they had 8 years together. He died in 1956 after suffering a stroke and had to be in a nursing home for a period of time. She lived with her son, and they moved down to Texas, and she died in Texas in 1973 at the age of 92, 93, something like that. Now there are, my sister Leona, she died quite tragically in 1938. She, I guess you would call it, she died of adhesions from a cesarean birth. She was a free bleeder, and they didn't know what to do in those days like they do now. That she formed so many adhesions that they kept choking off her kidneys and bladder, her intestines, until they actually caused gangrene. She died in 1938 at the age of 25.
Can you tell us about how you met your husband-to-be and what types of jobs you had before your marriage?
Well, the jobs I had were actually only 2 jobs besides my growing up job of babysitting and keeping house while the rest of the family all went and picked cherries and everything and whatnot that there was to do what fine country people did. When I went downtown to work at the age of 16 and a half, I worked at the Amazon. I worked in the packing department. I would find out what kind of orders there were for the union suits or the children's underwear that came through, the folders. I would bring the boxes to them, and then I would tie the boxes and enter them on the orders and tie them up and carry them to the end of the aisle for the shipping boys to pick up. But it sure didn't pay very much. So I got a job. I worked there a long time, 1925 until 1928, I believe. Then I got a job in the American Wire Company, and I wound coils until I took leave or quit to have my first baby. That was in 1929. And that was the jobs I had. So I've had plenty of jobs since, keeping house and cooking and washing and baking.
How did you meet your husband?
I met my husband through my cousin Pauline. Now, she was actually a double cousin. She was a daughter of Henry and Uncle Henry and Aunt Minnie O'Neill. And we lived across the alley from each other on Muskegon Avenue and Houston Avenue. And Pauline told my sister Grace what a nice young fellow had a room there. He wasn't boarding with them, he just had a room on the same floor that they were. And so she arranged for us to get together. And that's how I met him, and he's practically my first and only boyfriend. And it's well over 49 and a half years now that we're married. His name was Charles Mullally, is Charles Mullally. Mine being Carol Meal, we had the same initials. When I bought him a cigarette case for his birthday, and I had the jeweler put his initial on it, and the date. He asked me if I was putting my own initials on it. Now, this cigarette case I had given to my oldest son because he also has the same initials. His name is Charles Joseph Mullally, too. My children's names are Doris Elaine Mullally, and she was married to Joe Walting. She was born in 1930. And there's Helen Marie, and she is married to Robert Johnson, and she was born in 1931. And Charles Joseph III, because Grandpa Mullally's name was Charles Joseph also. He was born in 1941. And Richard Edward was born in 1945. And that's my family.
Why was I named Richard Edward?
Richard Edward was named after his uncle, Richard Edward, who was a very likable fella. He liked children. He used to be over a lot. And he was asphyxiated at the Napsol refinery in a tank car in 1938. That was 7 years before our Dick was born. He left the little girl 7 months old. It was very sad. That's why we named. Our first boy, of course, was named after his dad and his grandpa, but then Dick, when he came along, he had to be Richard Edward.
My uncle gave up his life to save another man, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He was the foreman, and when this other man was down in the tank car cleaning, Dick was telling us about that just the night before it happened. He was here. He was playing with Doris and Helen, and he told how they were cleaning off his tank cars and the fumes. They had to wear a mask. Well, this other fella had a mask on, but it was evidently leaking. So when he dropped over, they called for Dick to come, and Dick had to run a long way to get there, and they had to jump down in the tank car. He jumped down in there and tied a rope around the fella, and he came back up, but he forgot to bring the rope up. They said, "Oh, you forgot the rope." So he goes back down in again. Well, of course, he just dropped right over. So someone had to go down in there and bring the rope up and pull up the other fellow, take the mask off, and put it on themselves and then go back down and bring up Dick. Well, of course, Dick was gone. But the other fellow, of course, was revived because he had only inhaled a small amount with the mask on. He just was a leaking mask. But Dick had just run in there all out of breath. He just drew it all in.
You raised two separate sets of children, really, didn't you? Two girls, and then you waited a few years and raised two boys?
Yes.
That was an unusual family arrangement for me because I really don't even remember my sisters living at home. They were married at the time I can first remember.
You were 5 years old.
Yes. What are your fondest memories of the years you were raising the little children?
Well, I don't know how to put that. I know that I appreciated the miracle, the God-given miracle of a healthy baby. Every little thing of them that I can't say it, that they are born with little eyes that see, every little toe and every little finger. I didn't appreciate that with my first children. I think it was because I was younger. With my second two, it really was a great thing to me. It's wonderful. I could see God in them. And also there were 4 of us to enjoy those 2 little ones. You didn't find out from Daddy about his other brothers.
Could you tell us about what Daddy couldn't tell us?
Well, they moved here from Chicago, and they brought their furniture. They brought their horse-drawn wagon and chickens. There's something. Chickens, cows, dogs with pups on that wagon, and hauling a mowing machine behind the wagon with the kids piled on it too. Got off in the boat at the boat dock and came down Western Avenue, and nobody even turned their head to take a second look. Came out here on the farm, and they had Jim and Mary and your dad, Charles. I don't know, they had another one too. There was Lily, I believe, that they brought along. Then George was born afterwards. He was born here. And then for some reason or another they moved back to Chicago, and they had another baby, but they lost Lily. She died at the age of 2. And they had George. And then they had another boy, Francis. They lost him also at the age of 2. And I had forgotten that they had another boy, Joseph, that came in between Charles and Lily. And he died at the age of 2, and he's buried in Chicago. The other 2 are buried in Laketon Township. Oh, then they had Richard, and Lucille. A total of 9 children, I guess. And they all worked hard on the farm and picked berries. They didn't have any of their own. They'd go to neighbors, the same as we did, and pick berries for a living.
Can you tell us the circumstances of Grandpa Mullally's death?
Yes, he was a good Samaritan. He was draining gasoline out of his tank of his truck to help somebody that came to the door and said they had run out of gas. But really, to come down to it, this car was not out of gas. There must have been something else wrong with the car. But he went out and crawled underneath, and as he was loosening the plug, why, the whole thing let loose. He got all the gasoline down on him, and one of these parties come running with a lantern to see what was the matter, and of course, there was the whole garage, and Grandpa went up. He got up and run out from the garage, laid out in front, but the whole truck and garage and house and everything went up. That was in April 17th, 1932. And he was, I believe, about 58 years old, comparatively young.
I know that you and your sisters have taken some trips and vacations. Can you tell us what you have done on these trips and where you've gone with your sisters?
Oh, the first year we went to Fayette, Michigan, and to the falls, Clonopan Falls. And the next year we went to Drummond Island. We did more reminiscing with 5 of us sisters and our sister-in-law Stella. And she really got along good and had a good time. She was just like a sister. We had grown up close to them, and my brother married into that family, and so they were all like one big family. Well, we went down to the Rockville or Rockford Covered Bridge Festival 2 years, and that's down in Indiana, in the winter. We have enjoyed, we always had some place we were going to go. We went to the, I can't think of the name now, that office. Can't think of it. That office, Fort Wayne, Indiana. What author that we went to? The author of, I can't even think of the book she wrote. Right on the end of my tongue. But anyway, wherever we went, we enjoyed it, and we enjoyed each other every day. Brothers and sisters. We get together 4, 5, 6, 7 of us right off the bat. I know 3 of them were together this afternoon out for lunch to celebrate Grace's birthday. She's 71 years old today. So they took her 2 carnations and took her out to Ponderosa for lunch. And I would, of course, been there if your dad wasn't sick. I'd have been with him.
What are your interests today? What kind of hobbies have you gotten involved in?
Oh, I have through the years, I've knitted for my grandchildren. I have made Christmas Santa Claus stockings for them all. Now I'm in a project of making clowns. I cut circles, gather them together and string them and get clown faces, make cuddly little colorful clowns. I have always enjoyed cooking and baking for them. My grandchildren, they're precious.
How many do you have?
14.
And you have great-grandchildren also, don't you?
2 great-grandchildren.
3?
3, sure. I I know, I'm not exactly interested. Doris was here yesterday. She's the grandmother of the three great-grandchildren. David, and Kristen, and Katie, Seid. That's S-E-I-D.
You're likely to have a few more soon, aren't you?
Well, there's no prospects right now, but no doubt there will be, because there are 4 grandchildren that are married. But they're finishing school, or they're teaching for a while. Finishing college or teaching. And one of them is finishing medical technician. Her last year of college.
Can you tell about your involvement in the church throughout the years, starting with the time when you first began?
Well, I first began to go to a Sunday school, which was the start of our church in 1936. Doris and Helen, the 2 little girls, and I started to go to Sunday school. So we went steady continually in Sunday school, but then I didn't get going there for a while when I had Charlie, 1941. And then Dick came along. So I was out for a while, but the girls had perfect attendance. They went to Sunday school all the time. And then they organized the church in that time. In 1942 they organized the church. So when I came back into it, and Dick was old enough to take and go, he went to Sunday school and going to church, and we joined the church in 1950. And I belonged to the Ladies' Aid. We had the Ladies' Afternoon Ladies' Aid. I belonged to that, and I've belonged to the Guild ever since. I enjoy it.
Well, thanks, Mom, for taking the time to share all of your feelings about the past and the present and future for all of your descendants.